Yo, I'm a property developer from the UK. I've developed over 8 figures in property assets and over 500 units with a mixture of HMOs and apartments. Over the years, we've made lots of mistakes and gained lots of experience. And in this video, I'm going to run through 6 crucial aspects of the project lifecycle that you need to get right to protect your investment returns and so that you don't lose money. Stay tuned. So this video is applicable mainly for HMOs, but also for smaller commercial to residential schemes as well. So we'll dive straight in with location, which is just fundamentally the most important part for any HMO development, because if you get the location wrong, it's the one thing you can't change. You can reconfigure the asset, you can improve the specification, you can get different kind of planning permission, etc., but you can't move the property. So you need to get the location right. And the location isn't just, it's in a town where the census data is good enough for a young demographic and a working professional demographic. So sure, the property's going to let all day long. That just doesn't work. Before we go into any new territory, we'll drive around the streets. Go and drive around, speak to local people. Best thing you can do is go into a local shop and ask the shopkeeper, what's it like in this area? How's the area fared over the last few years? And you'll find out a lot of crucial market data without just searching on Google. You'll find out from the people in the streets themselves. However, you should also search on Google. Find out where the key regeneration areas are, who's the big employers in the area, and are you close to local amenities and things like that. So speak to locals. Honestly, you'll get so much value out of just going into the local corner shop and just speaking to the merchant and just asking them all kinds of information about that local street. And most of them are usually really willing to have that conversation with you. And then Google. You can't really beat Google, and Google Earth particularly, to really go on Street View, walk around, get an idea of areas before you go and start driving through those areas. Because the streets can be so different from street to street. You could be on one street here that will let really well as a HMO and you attract good professional tenants. You could go 2 streets away and you could be, boarding onto a prison or to, a local mental hospital. And that means that nice families don't really want to live there, which means that the street over time has been more populated with social housing and things like that. And then it's got more deprived issues. Therefore, good working professionals may not particularly want to live in that area. You could struggle on the back end. So Google Earth is a great way to get a sense check on the area before you go spend time there, speaking to locals when you're there, and driving around the streets. Just driving around is a super quick way to be able to assess an area, because, you can walk the streets as well, of course, but you just drive around and you get an idea. Is there scaffolding on the street? Are people working on their homes? Do they care about their homes? Is there new roofs and solar panels and things like that? These sound trivial, but it means that people are willing to invest in their assets within that area, which means it's probably a good enough area for them to put their money there. So those are things you want to consider as well. And then you got the big employers. Where are the big employers? And in towns, you can have either, huge local council buildings where you might have the civil servants or admin or whoever at the local councils that want to live frugal accommodation in the local area. You can also have hospitals. Hospitals do a lot of intakes over the year and they train up a lot of staff from overseas, and generally they like HMOs or apartments. And then you've got big industry. So, huge manufacturers. Take Sunderland, for example. Nissan factory there. They're a huge employer for that town. And sometimes these towns are anchored around their huge employers. In the northeast, it's coal mines, it's steelworks, it's shipbuilding that historically employed most of the local populace. And in other areas of the country, there's different industries that governed those particular towns. And you now want to know who are those big employers and know where those employers are situated within the town. So knowing where the employers are, super important. And then you just got amenities, which is pretty obvious. How far does someone have to go for a loaf of bread or a carton of milk? Those things are really important. When someone moves there, they will think about those things. How do I have to walk 3 miles every time that I want to go get some milk so I can make a cup of tea in the morning? So amenities, make sure you are close to local amenities, or you're at least close to bus links that can get to those local amenities nice and quickly, which is the next bit, which is public transport. Now, typically HMO tenants, frugal, they don't necessarily have cars. They're reliant on public transport and cycling. So if there's good public transport on your doorstep, then that's going to be ideal and attractive for any prospective tenant. So these things sound straightforward when you hear them in isolation, but a lot of people don't go into that kind of DD when they are securing their property or booking in viewings. You can do all of this. You can pre-qualify all of this before ever leaving your laptop, other than, speaking to locals and driving around. But you can pre-qualify at least what these things are going to be like from a laptop. So do that and then go there, speak to locals, drive around the town and really get to know those streets, get to know the area as if you're almost a local there yourself. And that's the benefit of sticking to local areas. And if you can invest within your own town, that's probably the best thing you can do in terms of knowing your local area. It doesn't mean it's the best financial returns, but it means that when it comes to location, you're probably going to be the best at vetting your existing area, the town you grew up in or the town you've lived in for many years. But anyway, that's location. Hopefully you're few useful nuggets there. The next thing is design, before we go on to architects. So design and architects, but we'll start with design. Now you can do quite a lot of the design yourself, and we actually have put together HMO masterclass, and we've got a load of free training that you can get by clicking the link in the description. It doesn't cost you anything, it's free, and you can get some advice and learn how to do some of these core steps like design. How can you do the design yourself without just relying on an architect every time and paying for expensive professional fees? You can do the design yourself, and I teach that in the HMO masterclass. You can use things like SketchUp, you can use things like Floor Planner, which is an online free tool. You can use things like PowerPoint. Sounds silly, but I did a lot of our first projects just on PowerPoint. Illustrated exactly what we could do with the building. It does actually have a scaling ruler if you want to try and mess around with using that. And then I gave that to the architect, and we ended up building almost exactly what I put on the PowerPoint. SketchUp goes into a lot more detail. Floor Plan is pretty basic, but it can at least give you an idea of the property. So you want to do this stuff yourself before giving it to an architect, until you can get to a certain size where you can have your own in-house design team like we have now. But you need to learn one of these softwares if you want to take development seriously. It's very, very useful. You go through the property, you have a laser measure, which you can get for about 60 quid online, digital laser measure. Go Google it. Amazon will do like next day delivery. And you take that, you go around a property and you check the sizes, note it down on a piece of paper, and then you come to SketchUp or PowerPoint or Floor Planner, and then you can create a 2D model of your building that you're looking to buy or a building that you have secured. And then once you've got that, you can play around with the design yourself. How can you find, the most optimized way to configure the building to get the kind of space you need out of it? But you have to be cost sympathetic. So it's useful if you can speak to a contractor at the same time, because if you're going to start moving around structural walls, that could be very expensive to achieve the desired layout. And then you start thinking of the return on that cost. How much is it going to improve the attractiveness of that room? Will you get a healthy return back on the cost you're going to spend with an uplift in that room by moving that structural wall and giving it an extra 1.5 meters in that bedroom? Now, we do think it's worth doing that. We always think it's worth maximizing space, but you don't always have to move structural walls. Sometimes there's other ways around it, which is why it's good if you can get good at design yourself, just high level. It doesn't have to be anything crazy. You don't need to start doing regs designs or packages. You just have to get that high level design done before you pass it to the architect, because the architect's not incentivized to do that work to the minuscule detail for you, whereas you are. And you can also learn what are the standard sizes for an ensuite in a HMO, what are the standard sizes for a bed and the furniture that you need to get in there, how big does that room really need to be, because space standards in the UK aren't going to help you. It's 6.51 for a single occupant room, and that's just tiny. You get a bed in there, maybe a wardrobe right next to it, but that's about it. You want to try and aim for between 10 and 14 square meters. That's net internal area before the ensuite. If you can get to that, you'll always have healthy sized rooms. So learn these softwares and learn how to do the design. And then you've got the architect and picking the right architect. So in your first few projects, you might have to work these two in tandem, do the design with the architect, go back and iterate, but you will pay for some of those iterations. So you want an architect with experience. So your architect has to have experience, not as an architect, but experience with HMOs. Because any old architect could say they could do HMOs. Yeah, that'd be easy. I've done loads of apartment buildings before. Why can't I do HMOs? But if they don't have a proven track record of HMOs, then they just won't be aware of all the minuscule things that you need to know when you're configuring these kind of assets. You are taking a house and you're putting a lot of infrastructure into the building. It's becoming quite a dense asset, which is why councils generally find them quite annoying, because they think it's overdevelopment of specific assets. That's a different kind of conversation. But architects may not be sympathetic to the things you need to be aware of in that building. Do you need to put fire lobbies in there? What about drop ceilings and other kinds of things, and right to lights, and the best way to configure the rooms so that your furniture layout works nicely? They may not know a lot of these little nuances within HMO products. So you want to make sure that your architect's got the experience. So check their website, speak to them, ask for proof of other designs they've done with their branded signature and branded header and things like that around the PDF. You don't just want to see like, a high level design they could have got off the internet. You want to make sure that architect knows what they're doing. And a lot of architects in the UK now tend to have experience with HMOs, because HMOs have become a lot more common over the last decade or so. So be sure to check that your architect has HMO experience. Just because they're an architect doesn't mean they'll be good at HMOs. Trust me, been through it many, many times before. The existing architecture firm that we work with now, we've worked with and taught them how we do our HMOs, how we maximize space. We've been through the ring of it with loft conversions, building out to the eaves, and the best way to reconfigure the stairs, and the best way to get those downstairs front and back bedrooms and minimize circulation area. There's all kinds of things that an architect may not be privy to, and they're not necessarily incentivized to spend all those hours extra to get to that end result that you're looking for, which is a big deal. You don't want to go through and spend 5 months and 100 or 200 grand on developing this asset on drawings that weren't thought out well enough, which is why it's good that you do the design and then instruct an architect with the relevant HMO experience. That will be super, super important, because it's those drawings are going to decide how you're going to spend a hell of a lot of capital. So make sure you get that stuff right. Anyway, that's the designs and architects. So next thing is contractor. Same thing applies. You want to make sure the contractor has the relevant experience with HMOs. And again, contractors will say the same thing as HMO. That'll be easy. I've done new builds before. I've done skyscrapers before. I've done all this and that before. But if they've not done HMOs, they'll get lost on a HMO site. There's so much nuance within the construction aspect of these HMOs, from your fire compartmentation, your acoustics, the heavy level of electrics that goes into these buildings compared to, say, a buy-to-let refurbishment, the en-suites, and make sure those waste runs are done well, they look nice, and they're efficient and effective. Manifolds and things like that you can use in isolation valves to make sure that the maintenance long-term is looked after, and we'll go into that in a second as well. You really want to make sure the contractor has experience. So look for proof that they've done it. Don't just take their word for it. Do not take a contractor's word for it. Go and see their sites. Show me your sites. Show me video evidence. Show me your update reports that you did when you were on that site. You know, there's all kinds of things you can ask them for to make sure there's proof that they've done HMOs before. And if they've not done HMOs before, and there's someone you really like, there's someone you really know, and you really want to use them, and sometimes that's a better option than someone you don't know who does have the relevant experience, then you just want to make sure that they know what they're doing when they're going into it. Make sure they are consulting building control at every step of the way. Make sure that they're not doing anything under the radar, which can happen. Contractors can do that, and they won't necessarily tell building control exactly how they've done certain things. Oh, it was existing, mate. We never did that. That was a previous owner. And building control might not be hot on it. You could have a shit building control officer, and therefore you're the one that owns the asset, you're the one spending the money, and you're the one that's going to lose out in the long run if the contractor's not done it properly. So make sure they're consulting building control in any event, and make sure that you are also involved within this consultation and within the plan check that will be done initially when engaging building control. And if there's building control site visits, you want to go as well, especially if you've just employed a new contractor. You want to go and make sure you read the reports from building control. You look for the non-compliance in that building control report and all the updates throughout, so that you can keep on top of your contractor, and your contractor's not just telling you, yeah, building control came around, all good, signed off, no problemo. Actually, there's 5 non-compliance items that they haven't hit yet, but they're going to get to that. And then they never get to it, and you get to the end of the project and you've got non-compliance, and then they hold you to ransom and go, oh, well, that wasn't a part of the scope, mate, so that's going to be another 10 grand if you want us to go retrospectively fit that. But actually, they just didn't do a good job during the consultation period. So you want to make sure you get that stuff done well, and it is just gearing them properly for maintenance, which contractors without HMO experience, they just really struggle with. They won't know what are the long-term wear and tear effects on these HMO products, because there are high levels of infrastructure within a building. You're gonna have quite a few people living in that building per square foot compared to, say, a single family. And you can get a lot of complaints and waste a lot of letting agent time, which fundamentally costs you money. So you wanna make sure that they know how to build them for maintenance. It's all good making them look super spanking and nice and really pretty, but if they cost you loads of maintenance continually because the infrastructure within the fabric of the building isn't done well, then it's just gonna cost you loads of money. And even more money, because then you've got really nice decoration that you're also gonna have to go and redo. If you've had a leak in your drywall, then you have to fix the drywall, and you have to fix, nice new wallpaper you put up, or colors on the feature walls, or whatever shit you've done to it, cladded walls or whatever. So there's a high level on contractors and how to make sure you pick the right contractor. Then there's maintenance. And this is this goes hand in hand with the contractor, but you wanna make sure you're building these things for long-term maintenance. And also the specification you wanna build and thinking about your location. If you're in the north of England, whether northwest, northeast, or even up in the upper Midlands, do you really wanna build things that are like, marble en suites and beautiful, expensive flooring and things like that? That in London, sure, might be a good idea, because you could have good working professionals working there who might be on 50, 60, 70 grand a year salaries and looking for frugal transient accommodation, and they might expect that sort of quality. You're not gonna get that in the north of England. I'm not saying that northerners are worse, I'm just saying the expectations are slightly lower, because up here traditionally, they haven't had that kind of specification. So do you wanna go and spend that arm and leg amount to get to that, and you're not really gonna get the return on your money for it, because that employment level just isn't in that specific location. So you wanna make sure that you're building to the right specification, which ties into your long-term maintenance. So do you, for example, tile an ensuite, or do you clad an ensuite? We always prefer cladding. It's just easier on the maintenance long-term. It's easier for the tenant themselves to clean. It's easier for our staff to clean on handovers and things like that. And also less leaks, because you don't have grouting issues. So tiles and cladding, that's just one aspect. And then you've got all kinds of other things like the furniture. What quality furniture are you putting in there? Because if you put in shit furniture, well, you can expect to be paying for it again in about 3 years' time. So you wanna make sure you're putting in good furniture. And if you can bolt them to the walls, or you can do built-in furniture, then that's gonna be like way more cost effective in the long run. Even though initially you might go, oh, it's another £200 a room for me to do that. Yeah, but you're not gonna have to replace it for 10, 15 years compared to every 3 or 5 years. So it's well worth looking at the quality of your furniture, which is then the same for the quality of the flooring. You don't wanna go put expensive carpets or laminate. I mean, you can put laminate on the ground floor and in the communal area. Might be all right, might be fine, because it's mostly just shoes walking on the laminate, and it does add a certain kind of quality to the property. So laminate does work, but there's also vinyl. So you could use vinyl. Vinyl will probably break quicker, but it's much cheaper to replace. If you break laminate, it could be a ball ache to replace and cost you more in maintenance to fix. So you want to think about those kind of things, and certainly don't go put in really expensive carpet, because these tenants won't care. They won't care. There's like 7 or 10 of them or 5 of them living in the property. If they spill coffee on it, or they scratch the floor, or their chair at their desk rubs the carpet away, it's not them that's going to be paying for that. Those are wear and tear costs that you will be paying for as the landlord. So flooring, make sure you get just good hard wearing flooring. You can make it look nice, you don't have to go for the cheapest shit. Just make sure it's hard wearing, good underlay under the floor so it's nice and soft, but you don't want to go for any crazy expensive shit. And then there's just the decoration. So for decoration, I've seen people go in and put like crazy shit in these properties, making them look really, really nice. But at scale, if you want to build a portfolio, if you've got a whole load of different properties that all look different and they've all got different bells and whistles and they're all different colors and shapes and things like that, then on your maintenance, you want to ideally have a dedicated maintenance person who knows all your properties. And if you've got all these different colors and shapes and wallpaper types and things like that, if they get scratched or they get broken, then they're gonna have to go and source all those different kinds of materials to make sure they're fixing your particular property, which sounds trivial, but again, over time, that is an extra cost. So if you can build them similarly, yeah, different color paint's not the end of the world, but if you can build them similarly, then that is gonna help you as well in the long run. So especially if you're looking at scale, you do want a standard product that you can go for. And as the landlord, as the developer, you can get bored of your colored feature walls. I've literally done this so many times and just gone, nah, fuck it, we're changing the color. But then you're changing your product and you are adding an additional workload long term that you might not necessarily be aware of initially, but over time it will start to cost you a bit more money. Now, trivial with colors is more things like, if you're doing different kinds of wallpaper, if you're adding different kind of dado rails and feature panels and acoustic panels and other bits into all of the bedrooms, all that kind of stuff will cost you long-term maintenance because it will eventually break, it will eventually scratch, it will eventually possibly get damp or have some kind of leak that goes behind it. So you just want to have a good idea on what you're putting into the building and that you don't get too carried away with making it look super, super, super nice, which may not necessarily get you any more in rent. It just makes you feel good as the developer, but actually long-term maintenance gets hampered for it. So decoration is something else to think about. And there's plenty of other things here to think about as well. And again, in the HMO Masterclass, we go through a whole load of these details so that you're armed with the right information. Letting agent, same principle applies. Letting agent needs to have the relevant HMO experience. If they don't have the experience, then you're really fucked because they're the guys that are there to protect your investment return, in essence. They're the guys that are going to put the people in the property who are then going to pay rent that's then going to give you a return on your capital. So if you don't use the right letting agent with the right HMO experience, they can put the wrong people in there. And that means the wrong people might just screw you over and not pay the right rent, or they can't afford the advertised rental prices because your agent's not done a good job of vetting and marketing the property or vetting the potential tenants that come in, and they're just trying to get the rooms off their books so they just rent them out to any old Joe, and then you might be losing out £25-50 a month. Yeah, you feel better because your room's let, but actually, annually, you're losing out on quite a lot of money there. £50 a month is however much a year, it's like 500, 600 quid a year. That's quite a lot to miss out on. You actually find out that you're usually better off waiting another month to get someone in at the right price. You're looking at those long-term renewals for the rental values when you need to increase the rental price in line with CPI index, the inflation numbers. So you want to make sure that long-term, you're getting the right price per room. So a good experienced letting agent will make sure they look after you for that. So vet the letting agent, which is much easier than say a contract. You just see what HMOs do you currently manage, like show me the HMOs you manage. And you should be able to see on Spare Room or Rightmove or on their website, they should have proof that they have let HMOs before, and you can just ask them typical questions. What's the typical profile of these sort of tenants? What's your screening process? Screening process, super important. How do they screen these tenants? You want to make sure that they're doing employment checks, that they're doing, right to live in the UK, obviously, that they're doing landlord references, that they are doing credit searches, things like that to make sure that they are able to afford the room once they're in there, but also that they're a decent person who is going to make sure that they pay the rent because they're employed locally by the hospital or by Morrison's or whatever. So make sure that their screening process is super tight, because in a HMO, agents will get carried away and just fill the rooms. You want to make sure that each of those tenants is properly vetted, goes into that property, and that the profile of those tenants is good. You want the right profile mix within that property. You don't want to put in, say, 4 40-year-old working contractors along with one young, early 20-year-old female who's working at the local Morrison's or pharmacy. That's probably not a healthy mix. So you want a letting agent that can sense check that kind of stuff, that's going to look after you as well as the tenants. And then you just want to really make sure that you understand their fee structure, because a lot of letting agents out there will advertise low fees to win your business, but then they'll charge you an extortionate amount in hourly rates and call-out charges to the property. They won't sort the maintenance properly and on time, which costs you more money in the long run. They won't clean the property properly. Our in-house cleaners, we get in bi-weekly in every HMO to make sure they're cleaning the communal areas and they're keeping an eye on the property, and they've all got a trivial amount of knowledge in maintenance, so they'll go and tighten screws and tighten up the doors and hinges and things like that and make sure that things are in good nick. And it's really important that your letting agent looks after all of that for you, because you're not there. You don't want to be, you're paying them for a service already. You don't want to be paying these extra hourly charges, which is why in our lettings business, we have 2 clean fees. We have a let fee, a management fee, and that's it. No extra charges, because we believe it's our responsibility within those fees to be able to keep down our costs, run a good process, run a good operation so that we can deliver that quality service without then charging an extra, usually 2 to 3% on gross in those additional charges. So don't be fooled by the advertising amount. Find out their fee structure exactly and what additionally they're charging you for. That's the fee structure, and there's plenty of other things to do with letting agents that you need to know as well. But for now, that should be a good overview. And then you've got the refinance and valuation, which brings us on to the last part of this video. So refinance. Now, you're gonna have to just go through this process. Again, we advise a lot, throughout my YouTube content, in the free training that we've got below in this video, you click the link for, and in our HMO masterclass, we go through this in detail. There's a lot of detail here that you wanna know to make sure you're getting this done right. But at a high level, the refinance, what kind of product are you going for? Are you going for a typical sort of buy-to-let product because you've got a 4 or 5 bed HMO, or do you want that commercial valuation? Now, most people always want that commercial valuation, but usually that kicks in around the 5 or 6 HMO mark and above. But you want to get the right mortgage, you want to get the right lender. So those lenders, you're looking for those commercial banks. That could be your Shawbrooks or a Lendinvest and a long list of others, Together, who are usually the lender of last resort. If you can't get lending from anyone else, then Together will probably lend on your asset. There's different kinds of brokers you can get for, this is just the refinance as well. We're not even talking about bridging here. This is for the back-end finance, long-term mortgage, 5-year fix. You want to go in for 5-year fixes? I don't really see the point in getting a 2-year fix because there's not enough security in that. 2 years, well, within a year, if interest rates start spiking or inflation comes back, it's not going to take a year to fix that stuff. It could take another 2 or 3 years, as we've just experienced since 2020 up till now. So a 5-year fix, so we have a property that we secured a 5-year fix on in 2020. We got something like a 3.5% mortgage on a large commercial asset, and that runs out in 2026. So we got very, very lucky there that we managed to save ourselves throughout that whole period by locking in a 5-year fix. Equally on a HMO, at the same time, we got a 2-year fix. And when it bounced out, it went from a 3.5% mortgage, similar to the other mortgage, to a fucking 7% mortgage. And that was cheap at the time as well. It could have easily been a 9%. It was actually a 9% variable, but then we locked it back in straight away to another 5-year fix. And we're paying quite an extortionate amount on that interest because we didn't lock in a 5-year. So make sure you're locking in 5-year fixes. This isn't financial advice. Speak to your broker to get the right advice, but I would say 5-year fixes is what you want to lock in, and then you want to shop around and make sure your broker is giving you at least 3 clear and concise offers, proposals from different lenders. Shawbrook are a good lender, Lendinvest are a good lender, and there's plenty of other lenders out there, but some of them, they'll have their BDM at the start promising the world and going, yeah, no problem, we'll lend on that. Yeah, we'll give you a commercial valuation, no problemo. And then they'll get through to the valuation and onto the back end, and then it goes to the underwriter, and then they change their story and go, yeah, it's going to be probably a bricks and mortar valuation for that one now, etc., because the BDM is there to try and bring the business in, the underwriter is there to protect the lender. And between them two, there can be a dynamic that means that your expectations from the start fall out of bed by the end, because then they're getting scrutinized more and more and more during that legal process. So 5-year fixes, a good thing to do. Shop around for the right lender, and then for the valuation, you want to make sure it's a valuer. Ideally, your broker's aware of, or your broker's worked that value before, and you know that you can get a good valuation out of that valuer because they have HMO experience. Go and check their website. Your broker should give you options. Any lender you choose should give you an option of values. You want to make sure that you vet those options for those values before you just pick one arbitrarily on price, because there's no point picking one on price because they'll just give you a shit valuation, and then you're going to pay for another one that's more expensive after anyway. You're going to double bubble your valuation cost. So make sure you pick a good valuer that also has the relevant experience. A valuer that does HMOs, a valuer that understands HMOs and commercial valuations, that a HMO is an income producing asset, that is its whole purpose, and that investors will buy those on a compressed yield. Not that you're going to sell it to some family who are then going to have to rip it all apart and turn it back into a 3-bed home, and that's why it's going to cost them more than what they're going to buy it for. Therefore, we're going to give it as a nil value. And I've seen valuers many times give HMOs 0 values. They just say it's worth nothing because you can't sell it. But investors will buy them. And the better location you're in as well, the more likely the value will lean on that commercial valuation, because they believe that that is the typical investment area for that type of product. So make sure you pick a good valuer, and be prepared and bake this into your cost to pay for the valuation twice, because you may pick the first valuer, they're shit, and if they give you a bad valuation, don't just take it, go get a second valuation and see. We had this with a client's one recently. Used the valuer, they came in with a 160 grand valuation. They went, fucking hell, on a 6-bed. And then they came back with a 260 when we went for a second valuation. And that was 100 grand difference in price, which is a massive difference and a huge amount of difference in what capital our client got back on the back end. So you really, really got to think think about the valuation process, and don't get too bogged down when they give you bad valuations, because everyone fucking goes through it. I've just had so many bad valuations now that when a bad one comes in, I go, yep, cool, just instruct another one. Like, that's just all you can do. And then you get to know the good valuers within your area. Ideally, you build a relationship with a valuer that's on the VAS panel, because the VAS panel is instructed by the lenders and is accepted by the lenders. So if you pick a valuer that is on the VAS panel, you're likely to build that rapport with them. You could get private valuations with them before you instruct the lender, so that you can get a sense check on the kind of value you'll get. Then when you instruct the mortgage on the back end, you can use that as evidence with the lender on the valuation that you've already had privately. But equally, you're building up rapport with a valuer that's used by multiple lenders because they're on the VAS panel. VAS panel, that's what that is there. VAS panel. You want a valuer that's on the VAS panel, and build that rapport in your local area. Again, a reason why it's good to operate within a local area and stick to a niche part of the UK, because all of these things over time become really, really valuable to your business. You know, it's like, like almost like proprietary data for your development business. You are learning things that your competitors may not learn because you're narrowed in on that niche within that micro location, or, maybe regional location. Typically a valuer will range around kind of like a 40-mile radius. Sometimes they're more specific to just a town. It sort of depends what you're getting valued, whether it's, a larger commercial asset or if it's a HMO or a buy-to-let. So anyway, that's valuers. You will get downvalued on some projects. It's just a ball ache, but that's what it is. So factor in 2 valuations for your refinance, and then try and go for the commercial valuation, where usually they'll apply a yield. They'll take off some of the OPEX, so they'll take your gross amount of rental income, they'll take off potentially 25% attributed towards management fees and utilities, and then they'll attribute a yield to that net amount, which if you're in the north of the UK, that can be anywhere between 9 and 13%, depending on the street and the area. And if you're in the south, that could be anywhere from 5 to 9%. So really depends on where you are. So you need to get to know your shit and speak to brokers, speak to developers, watch these sorts of videos, buy our HMO masterclass, shameless plug, and get to know how this method works, because it will be worth a hell of a lot of value to you if you can understand this process on the back end, because that's where you're going to get your capital back to go and buy another one. So anyway, that's the end of this video. Hope it's been useful to any of you watching. Make sure you subscribe, leave me a comment for other kinds of videos you want to see. Big love. See you in the next one.